Buying a home in California still sounds like a dream. But in 2026, in many cities, that dream is turning into a financial trap. Prices look stable, listings look attractive. But beneath the surface, rising insurance costs, hidden risks, and weakening demand are locking buyers into homes they can't easily afford or escape. These aren't the cities everyone warns you about. These are the ones quietly pulling buyers in. In this countdown, we're breaking down the 10 worst cities in California to buy a home this year. These aren't random locations, and this isn't about personal taste or lifestyle preference. Each city on this list shows clear warning signs. From collapsing affordability and insurance chaos to weakening demand, rising risks, and long-term uncertainty that buyers cannot ignore. We're starting at number 10 and working our way toward the city facing the most severe conditions. Number 10. Los Angeles. Los Angeles still projects wealth, influence, and opportunity. But beneath the surface, the housing math has become deeply unstable. In 2026, the median home price in Los Angeles remains far beyond what most households can realistically support, even as buyer demand continues to soften. High interest rates have transformed already expensive homes into long-term financial liabilities. Monthly mortgage payments routinely exceed what many families earn in an entire month. Insurance is another growing problem. Fire risk, theft, and property damage have driven premiums sharply higher across large portions of the city. Some insurers have quietly pulled back coverage altogether, forcing buyers into expensive limited policies that offer little peace of mind. At the same time, crime and quality of life concerns are weighing heavily on buyer confidence. Neighborhoods that once commanded premium pricing are seeing longer listing times and repeated price cuts. Sellers are chasing a shrinking pool of qualified buyers, and many are discovering that prestige alone no longer moves inventory. Los Angeles isn't collapsing overnight, but it is losing its margin for error. For buyers entering the market now, even small shifts in prices or costs can translate into years of financial strain. Number 9. Oakland. Oakland's housing market reflects a city under pressure from multiple directions at once. Prices remain elevated relative to local incomes, creating a gap that has become increasingly difficult to justify. While values surged during the pandemic years, demand has cooled significantly since then. Buyers are cautious, and many are unwilling to absorb the risks Oakland now presents. Public safety remains a major concern. Rising crime has accelerated population loss, particularly among middle-income households and families. This outflow weakens neighborhood stability and undermines long-term property values. Insurance costs have surged, especially in hillside areas vulnerable to fire. Some homeowners now face premiums that have jumped dramatically in just a few years, further eroding affordability. Inventory is no longer scarce. Homes are sitting longer, and price reductions are becoming routine. Oakland still offers cultural depth and proximity to San Francisco, but in 2026, those advantages are no longer enough to offset rising risks and declining confidence. Number 8. Stockton. Stockton was once viewed as a more affordable alternative within California's housing landscape. That reputation is now under serious strain. While home prices here are lower than in coastal cities, they have still climbed far faster than local wages. Many buyers are stretching their finances just to enter the market, leaving little buffer for rising costs or economic disruption. Foreclosure activity is beginning to rise again, a familiar warning sign in a city that was hit hard during the last housing crash. Adjustable rate mortgages resetting at higher rates are adding pressure to already stressed households. Crime remains a persistent issue, weighing on buyer interest and investor confidence. At the same time, new construction continues to add supply, even as demand weakens. That imbalance is pushing prices downward in certain segments, increasing the risk of negative equity for recent buyers. Stockton's market feels fragile. For buyers hoping for stability, The combination of rising supply, financial stress, and economic vulnerability makes this a dangerous place to commit long-term capital. Number 7. San Diego. San Diego still sells the image of coastal perfection, but the numbers tell a far less comforting story. Median home prices have climbed to levels that place ownership out of reach for most residents. Even dual-income households are devoting unsustainable portions of their earnings to housing costs. When taxes, insurance, and maintenance are added, affordability breaks down quickly. Insurance has become one of the fastest-growing expenses. Wildfire exposure, coastal erosion, and climate-related risks have pushed premiums sharply higher. In some cases, buyers are forced to accept stripped-down coverage at premium prices. At the same time, inventory is quietly building. Luxury condos and suburban developments are no longer selling effortlessly. Sellers are cutting prices to remain competitive, signaling weakening demand. San Diego remains desirable, but desire alone does not support a market. In 2026, buyers here face extreme costs with diminishing upside, combination that rarely ends well. Number 6. Burbank. Burbank's housing market looks stable at first glance, but that appearance is misleading. Prices here remain elevated, despite limited room for economic growth. Unlike major coastal hubs, Burbank does not benefit from global demand or luxury-driven inflows. Its market depends heavily on local employment and regional stability, both of which are showing strain in 2026. Media and entertainment jobs, once a reliable anchor, have become increasingly volatile. Project-based work, layoffs, and production slowdowns have weakened income certainty across the city. That instability directly impacts buyer confidence. Inventory pressure is also building. Homes are staying on the market longer, and sellers are being forced to adjust expectations. Small price cuts are becoming more common, especially for properties that need updates or repairs. Insurance costs add another layer of risk. Fire exposure and rising rebuild costs have driven premiums higher, eating into already stretched budgets. For buyers entering now, ownership comes with growing fixed costs and limited appreciation potential. Burbank isn't collapsing, but it's stagnating. And stagnation is dangerous when prices are still near historic highs. Number 5. Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz has long benefited from scarcity-driven pricing, but that advantage is now turning against buyers. Home values here remain extremely high relative to local wages. The market relies heavily on buyers bringing external income or equity from other regions. As affordability tightens statewide, that buyer pool is shrinking. Insurance challenges are becoming severe. Fire risk in surrounding areas and limited insurer participation have made coverage both expensive and difficult to secure. Some buyers face unexpected costs after purchase, undermining financial planning. Tourism-driven demand no longer provides the same support it once did. Short-term rental regulations and softer travel spending have reduced investor appetite. Properties that were once seen as income-generating assets are now producing thinner margins. Inventory constraints remain, but scarcity alone is no longer enough to sustain pricing. Buyers are pushing back. Negotiations are harder. Price reductions are becoming more visible. Santa Cruz still offers lifestyle appeal, but in 2026, lifestyle is no longer enough to justify the financial exposure required to buy here. Number 4. Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara represents one of the clearest examples of risk hidden behind beauty. Home prices remain extraordinarily high, driven by long-standing prestige and limited supply. But the pool of buyers willing to absorb those prices is narrowing. Even affluent households are reassessing risk in 2026. Insurance has become a defining issue. Fire exposure, rebuilding costs, and climate-related risk have pushed premiums to extreme levels. Some properties are now effectively uninsurable without specialty coverage, dramatically increasing ownership costs. Maintenance expenses are also rising sharply. Aging housing stock, combined with high labor costs, makes upkeep expensive and unpredictable. For buyers, this turns ownership into an ongoing financial commitment rather than a stable investment. At the same time, buyer behavior is shifting. Homes are staying listed longer. Sellers are quietly offering concessions. The sense of urgency that once defined Santa Barbara's market is fading. This city still attracts wealth, but wealth alone does not eliminate risk. In 2026, Santa Barbara demands a level of financial tolerance that fewer buyers are willing to provide. The cities at this stage of the list share a critical trait. They are not struggling in obvious ways. They remain desirable, expensive, and well-known. But beneath that surface, the fundamentals are weakening. Demand is narrowing, costs are climbing, risk is rising. These markets are not breaking suddenly. They are bending under pressure. And as we move into the final stretch of this countdown, the warning signs become impossible to ignore. The remaining cities are facing conditions so extreme that even long-term confidence is starting to crack. Number 3, Palm Springs. Palm Springs has shifted from a lifestyle market into a high-risk speculative zone. For years, buyers were drawn here by second home demand, short-term rentals, and retirement appeal. That demand inflated prices far beyond what the local economy could support. In 2026, the gap between value and sustainability is widening rapidly. Short-term rental restrictions have reduced investor upside. Many properties that once relied on tourism income are now producing inconsistent cash flow. Owners facing higher mortgage payments and rising costs are beginning to exit. Heat-related challenges are becoming impossible to ignore. Extreme temperatures are increasing utility costs, stressing infrastructure, and changing how buyers evaluate livability. Cooling expenses are no longer seasonal inconveniences. They are permanent operating costs. Insurance premiums have surged, particularly for properties exposed to wildfire risk and aging construction standards. Some buyers discover after purchase that coverage is limited, expensive, or conditional. Inventory is rising as demand softens. Homes are staying listed longer, and price reductions are no longer rare. Palm Springs still attracts attention, but attention does not equal stability. In 2026, buying here means accepting volatility, not just in pricing, but in long-term viability. Number 2, Mendocino. Mendocino's housing market is built on isolation, scarcity, and natural beauty, all of which now work against buyers. Prices remain extremely high for a small, remote market with limited economic diversity. Most buyers depend on outside income, retirement funds, or wealth generated elsewhere. That dependency becomes fragile when broader economic pressure rises. Insurance is the most serious obstacle. Wildfire exposure has pushed premiums to extraordinary levels, and coverage availability is increasingly uncertain. Some properties are effectively uninsurable through traditional channels. Infrastructure limitations add further risk. Emergency services, healthcare access, and supply chains are strained by distance and terrain. These realities matter more as buyers prioritize resilience over novelty. Demand has slowed noticeably. Properties that once sold quickly now linger on the market. Sellers are discovering that scarcity no longer guarantees urgency. Mendocino remains visually stunning, but beauty does not offset financial exposure. In 2026, buying here requires tolerance for risk that few buyers truly understand at entry. Number 1, San Francisco. San Francisco stands at the center of California's housing contradiction. It is one of the wealthiest cities in the world, yet its housing market is under extraordinary strain. Prices remain high, but confidence has eroded. Demand is no longer broad. It is selective, cautious, and shrinking. The tech sector, once a limitless source of housing demand, has become unpredictable. Layoffs, remote work, and restructuring have reduced the urgency to live in the city. High-income buyers now have options elsewhere. Insurance costs have escalated sharply. Fire risk, Earthquake exposure and rebuild expenses have driven premiums higher while reducing coverage flexibility. Ownership now carries layers of financial uncertainty. Quality of life concerns are also weighing on buyers. Public safety, governance challenges, and population decline have altered perception. Homes that once sold instantly now require multiple price adjustments. Inventory remains elevated relative to demand. Sellers compete for a smaller pool of qualified buyers, many of whom negotiate aggressively or walk away entirely. San Francisco isn't facing a sudden crash, it's facing a long recalibration. And for buyers entering in 2026, that recalibration carries enormous downside risk. These 10 cities share a common reality. They are not failing because people stopped wanting to live in California. They are struggling because the cost of ownership has outpaced stability, confidence, and long-term sustainability. High prices alone do not define risk. Rising insurance costs, economic volatility, shrinking demand, and structural pressure do. In 2026, buying a home in these cities means accepting uncertainty that did not exist just a few years ago. For buyers who ignore those signals, the consequences won't be immediate, but they will be lasting.